Hello and welcome to another episode of the Silk and Steel podcast. I'm your host, Carl Za. Today we have another very exciting episode with the Chinese tech expert, TP Huang. I had him on last year when we talked about the Huawei breakthrough with the manufacturing of 7 nanometer chip used in the Huawei Mate 60. Today, we want to switch to a different topic with the Chinese EV. Right now, if you read the news, you already know Chinese EV is poised to take over the world. Or from the point of view of the US Congress, the Chinese are taking over, so we must put a stop to that. And I know TP has been following the Chinese EV development forever, so I invited him back to give us a insider view of the Chinese EV industry. So welcome to the show, TP.
Thanks. Glad to be back.
Yeah, there's a lot to talk about. China continue to make advance in the semiconductor space. I'll have you to talk about that when we have a new breakthrough. But so I understand you have been following the Chinese EV space for a long time. And can you maybe give us a brief overview of the history of EV development in China?
Sure. I think that the first time I really caught on to the Chinese EV developments was when I heard of a little company called BYD back in 2007, 2008. And it was kind of exciting at that time to hear about
That
that.
must be the time when Warren Buffett announced his investment in BYD, that might even be earlier than that. I remember it was a big deal when Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger kind of, like they proudly showed off their investment in BYD, and then soon after that, the BYD stock just shot straight
Yeah.
up. Yeah.
I think that was basically, they tipped me off. Maybe I should follow this company, right? So I started following them at that time, and they were the first in China to create a plug-in hybrid with their products, and they were the first to produce the first, battery electric vehicle with no gasoline at all. And then I would say over time, there was about 10 years there where it didn't feel like the market was moving all that much because China was developing the technology needed for mass adoption of EVs. And then one of the catalysts that actually helped the Chinese EV industry was actually when Tesla came. Because what happened when Tesla came is people started seeing EVs as this luxury item. People in China started seeing that, hey, this is an American brand, this is so cool. EVs must be a good thing. So
I remember that. I remember when BYD. So when I first followed BYD development in China after the Warren Buffett investment, that's when I realized, okay, BYD was a battery maker, and they're trying to switch into a EV space. But as I was trying to follow their EV development, I realized the electric vehicles, when they set out to make, was actually a very small portion of their business, because not only main bulk of their business was in the battery, but even when they branch out into the car business, most of the cars they made and sold were ICE cars, the internal combustion engine cars. And BYD actually had a reputation for making affordable car for the mass market. I remember there was a Chinese dating show called 非诚勿扰, and I remember the girls on the show all making fun of how BYD is a cheap car, right? And I thought, oh man, BYD is gonna have an image problem, marketing their stuff despite the Warren Buffett investment. And so yeah, I remember that. So for about like 10 years, there hasn't been much movement on the electric front. I know BYD, they set up a factory in Los Angeles. They were about to making, I think they either made or about to make electric buses for the U.S. market. Of course, there's also like resistance from the U.S. Congress. They're freaking out about Chinese takeover, and then just just in the space of the last few years, and suddenly the Chinese EV really kind of start to dominate the headline. Can you tell us like how that transition happened?
Yeah, so my feeling is that BYD, when they first started making cars, they weren't very good at it. Like they were making cheap cars. People in China even thought so, right? And even compared to some competitors like Geely and Chery, they were considered to be not the greatest quality cars, but they had an expertise in basically batteries, and that was their core technology. And through the past, I would say like 15 years, you can see them getting better technologically over time. And the one thing that they always kept is this ability to ramp up manufacturing really good. And um, and that has really shown up in this explosion of EVs in China. So what happened after Tesla showed up is that when Tesla showed up, Chinese EV makers also, caught onto this wave a little bit, and they were able to start really seek out this much higher demand from the Chinese market. And that's when BID really went to work in 2021, 2022, because they realized that this is like a once in a generation opportunity for Chinese automakers to overtake the foreign automakers. And they had
And I
everything.
remember when Tesla came to China, Chinese government have some kind of requirement that Tesla must source local suppliers, right? They must have like a certain percentage of the locally made component, and I think that's one of the key factor to power the Chinese like manufacturing forward in terms of EV, because a lot of the a Chinese supplier gained the knowledge by making the parts for Tesla, right? I guess there must be some kind of technology transfer or training on Tesla to train their Chinese suppliers, right?
I would say that Tesla definitely helped cultivate the Chinese supply chain, but since that was probably more like a 3 years ago kind of thing, and whereas more now the Chinese supply chain has moved so far ahead that right now China can go without Tesla, but Tesla can't will be in terrible shape without China. Tesla basically did not start making money until uh, it started Giga Shanghai. But just just going back a little bit on BYD itself, it was able to then put in the strategy of building up a whole bunch of factories around China, so then they can ramp up production from. Um, they were selling fewer cars than Tesla in 2021, and then they suddenly moved to all new energy vehicles, or we call them NEVs. And because they have this plan in place, they were able to ramp up their production so quickly, and also ramp up the number of models they offer so quickly that they quickly became the largest NEV maker in China. And then very quickly after that, they became the largest NEV maker in the world. And by the end of 2023, the Q4 of 2023, they made even more pure battery electric vehicles than Tesla did.
But how did that? I mean, how did the Chinese marketplace shift? Because I remember when BYD first came out with electric car more than a decade ago. They like one of the reasons they weren't making that many cars because there's not much market for it. Not many people were buying electric cars, and I even remember when Tesla came to China, Elon Musk would ask about his Chinese competitor BYD. He just laughed and he said, BYD's job right now is just to survive in China. Like it's laughable to compare BYD with Tesla. Of course, Tesla is a luxury brand. BYD at then is aimed for making affordable cars for everyday use.
There's competitors now ramping up, and
Yeah.
as you're familiar with, BYD, which is also on the West Coast, I think they're ramping up production of their electric vehicles. Warren Buffett owns 10% stake in that. Why do you laugh? BYD is trying to compete. Why do you laugh?
Have you seen their car?
I have seen their cars, yes. In fact, at the Berkshire Hathaway meeting, I saw their cars.
Yeah.
Well, they are on a different, tell me why you're laughing. You don't see them at all as a competitor?
No.
Why is that? I mean, they offer a lower price point.
I don't think they have a great product.
Why is that?
I don't think it's particularly attractive. The technology is not very strong. And BYD as a company has pretty severe problems in their home turf in China.
Right.
So I think their focus is, and rightly should be, on making sure they don't die in China.
But how did that transition? How did the Chinese consumers start to adopt, to adopt electric vehicle on mass scale?
So I think the first thing to think about is that the Chinese auto market itself grew a lot. Basically, it grew into the world's largest market about 10 years ago, and that was due to obviously the huge rising income of the Chinese population. So once you go from average of $2,000 to $3,000 per capita to maybe 10,000 or like 5 or 6,000 per capita, if every family is saving up for a car, you're going to have a lot of people able to buy cars. So now you have a much larger population who are able to buy cars. But beyond that, I think the appearance of Tesla really upsold the value of the NEV. So then the Chinese market then started to think that, okay, well, if I should be willing to pay more for EVs because it has all these great features, right? Why is EVs or NEVs better than combustion engine cars? This is a thing that I try to explain to people, and my justification is this. In general, as our technology progress forward, electrical almost never loses to mechanical. So electrical systems in general react faster, they sense this thing faster. So in other industries, we have seen, for example, we went from like just old phones into cordless phones, into smart cell phones, into smartphones. So each step of the way, you got more electrical and more software oriented over time. So it's only natural for something like a combustion engine car to go from mechanical to electrical once the technology becomes mature enough.
Okay, but TP, that's from an engineer's point of view, right? But from consumers' point of view, what's the attraction of electric car versus internal combustion cars when when the infrastructure was already in place for ICE cars? You have gas station everywhere. It doesn't take long to charge up your car, and you don't have the range anxiety, right? Because you can always fill up your car every few blocks. So there's still certain advantages ICE cars have over electric cars. Then why did the Chinese mass consumer market shift towards the electric vehicles?
So I do think if you look at the adoption of NEVs in China, you do see that the adoption happened the soonest in tier 1, tier 2 cities, especially places like Shanghai, Shenzhen, Beijing, right? Because one, there is like a bit of also the environmental consciousness of buying EVs instead of ICE cars because of the pollution, the noise levels, and things like that. And if you go from all I hear, I haven't been to China for a while, but from everyone I talk to, when you go to like tier 1 cities in China, things are very quiet because everything's electrified.
I've seen videos. I've seen a lot of Western vloggers right now flocking into China, making videos about in China for the first time after 4 years. And one of the things they always, express amazement is all these quiet cars on the road, all these cars with the brands they never heard about, outside of China, and they're electric cars.
And what do you know? Electric car followed by Tesla. Hey, look at that, 3 in a row. Another electric car coming up. I think Shanghai has to be the capital of electric cars in the whole world. It must be true. I've never seen this many electric vehicles.
One of the reasons has got to be the investment into the infrastructure to support the electric cars by the Chinese government, right? I imagine the Chinese subsidies both to the consumers and also just building charging stations must have played a huge role in this, right?
Yeah, so I think there was definitely a lot of right policies played into place. So there was subsidies, which both Tesla and BYD really made a lot of money off. There was investment both publicly and privately to building this charging network. So there is a wide availability of charging network in China, even though it's still not as convenient as a gas station probably, but it's a lot better than most countries out there, and they're continuously improving. Whereas previous generation, it was good just to have like fast chargers. Now they need really fast, ultra fast chargers that can charge your car in like 20 minutes or something like that, or 10 minutes they charge 50% of your car.
Yeah, I remember in my travel to China in 2019, uh, I was traveling around my father's hometown, and there's a lot of new real estate development, and I saw all the new real estate development there. They're not just put up buildings and subways or metros, but they're also building like electric stations for electric motors and electric cars. So they're obviously planning ahead.
Yeah, I think they did a pretty good job of that. And now a lot of the drivers behind the newer stations they're building are actually the EV companies themselves, because it's in their incentives, and it's also in the incentives of all the gas companies. Okay, we need to wherever we have gas, wherever we have like all these gas stations, we need to actually start putting chargers in there, because then nobody's going to use our gas stations anymore, right? So there's a lot of drivers inside China now after the initial wave by the government, because everyone can see that the market is shifting toward NEVs day by day.
I must say, I was pleasantly surprised with the speed of adoption of EV by the Chinese industry, because I remember even 10, 20 years ago, like 20 years ago, I was on Chinese forum, and there were a lot of posts about like very pessimistic about the future of Chinese auto industry, because back then people were saying, look, we are always two generations behind the Western automakers, the American, European, and Japanese, because at that time the Chinese auto industry was dominated by these joint ventures with the foreign automakers, and the way they describe it is that the foreign automakers always manage. The cars they build in China is always like a couple generations behind the latest model they roll out to the European, North America, and the Japanese market, and that way they were able to keep the Chinese automakers always playing catch up. They're always two generations behind in the internal combustion engine car market, and with EV they really were able to kind of leapfrog the technology, so to speak, because one of the things I think somebody pointed out, there are 3,000 or more components in an internal combustion engine car, where there's significantly less, maybe up around 2,000 components in an electric car. So it's a lot easier, in a way, to make electric car than to make an internal combustion engine car. Would you say that's accurate?
Yeah, and I think I might offend some people in my next little bit. So I'll just say this. I think one of the best illustration of the changes in automotive industry is just seeing how much Huawei really took off in the past few months in the EV industry in China, because they're not someone that had any experience in making internal combustion engines cars. Clearly, their expertise were in just hard tech, soft tech in general. So their expertise is like a lot of the making things energy really efficient, writing great software and things like that. So when you see the market shift from internal combustion engine cars or ICE cars to smart cars, smart NEVs, which is what Huawei is making right now. And like a lot of people that have driven the Ito M9 says it's like the best SUV they've ever driven. And the reason for that is the quality of the car can be seen in the technology that they show in there. It's not just Huawei fanboys saying this is a great car. It's, when you drive it, And the technology in terms of the cockpit technology, in terms like how it's going to handle your command, in terms of driving itself, what we call ADAS, which is advanced driving assistance systems. These are the things that like Chinese industry is developing because it has this expertise in software. Whereas this is going to offend a lot of people. I'm just going to say this: the Germans and the Japanese can't program. We're shit. So
Well, now come to think of it, because I work in the software industry, like for many years. And come to think of it, I think you're right, because I don't remember too many Japanese or German colleagues. I have just Chinese and Indians mostly.
yeah, and I always tell this to people. If you look, one of the issues that Volkswagen had was their EV transition is the software just had too many bugs. It doesn't work. And if you think about it, like in the Western countries, if you're a good software developer, you're likely not going to stay in Germany. You're not going to stay in Europe. You go to Silicon Valley. You go to New York, maybe London. I don't know. But you go to places where there is a developed software industry, because America kind of like monopolized the software industry. And thankfully for China, it didn't let America monopolize China's software industry. Then it was able to develop all these great tech companies like Tencent, Alibaba, Baidu, Huawei, and ByteDance, all these guys. And because it has this software industry culture, it was able to do this integration of software to hardware. And what Huawei has done is has turned EVs into consumer electronics.
I think all the talented Japanese programmers all went to work for, developing games for PlayStations. I think that's what happened.
You're probably right on that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, but sorry, go.
One of the things I was really impressed about is that right now, almost seems there's a gold rush in China. Everybody's trying to get into the EV space. You already mentioned Huawei, which has very little experience making cars, are now coming out with their own EVs. I spend a lot of time on the Chinese social media Douyin, which is a Chinese version of the TikTok. For the people who don't know, the TikTok is the international version of the software. The Douyin is what's circulate. It's by the same company, ByteDance, but the Douyin is a Chinese domestic version. TikTok is the international version. But Douyin for me is has much more interesting content. So I spent a lot of time there. And on Douyin, I saw like even the Chinese liquor manufacturer like Maotai and Wuliangye, their bread and butter is making Chinese liquor. Even they are rushing into investing and making their own branded EV cars. So why is it that such a slow adoption by traditional car makers in Germany and Japan?
So I think it goes back to my thinking that we have this once in a lifetime opportunity of going from mechanical to electrical and software and AI. And we're doing this in a very compressed period. And the companies that were good at doing efficient internal combustion engines, they're not so good at doing electrical systems, but they're even worse at software, and they're even worse at AI. And you really need good AI to develop all these advanced smart cockpit that you're seeing out of China now, where you just tell them what to do and they'll answer you, they'll take you where you need to go. And then if you need to go somewhere, you just let the car drive by itself. And then
come on, TP, I have to stop you right there. But the US lead the world with AI, man. Chat GPT, come on. Why didn't US develop something like that, like AI powered EV cars?
So I think in America, Tesla kind of sucked all the energy out of it. And you can see that recently Apple gave up on EVs because it's not easy. And the reality is, and this is something that the US politicians they're driving crazy about this, but the reality is China really dominates the entire supply chain for EVs. It goes well beyond batteries. I was doing like a chart recently of just all the different subsystem of an EV, and you can see that basically aside from tires and window, maybe BYD produces all the rest of the stuff by itself. So
How,
it,
how did that happen though? How did China come to dominate the EV supply chain? Was it because of Tesla? Was it because of Tesla's first entry into China, or was it something else?
I think batteries, like the investment the Chinese government made into batteries, was a very smart decision. And the investment into, but later on, like a lot of the supply chain, Tesla did help, but also the Chinese industry itself was getting good at it. They were getting good at making electric motors. You know, they were getting really good at any kind of new energy related stuff. So all these power chips, control chips, they're getting better at these things. So they're able to make it themselves. And but in terms of the electric control, really efficient electric drives, and making very integrated, efficient electric platforms, because there's so much new companies starting from fresh, just designing them. They were able to solve these problems, and the Germans weren't. And Tesla was able to do it, but Tesla, let's just say, Musk has been kind of distracted, and I don't think Tesla is making a lot of right moves at the moment.
What I'm actually surprised about, like I had expected Chinese EVs would be like other Chinese manufactured goods that would first gain the marketplace by pricing advantage, by making things cheaper. But now I'm seeing some Chinese EV cars. They're not that much more inexpensive than, say, Tesla. They're maybe a little bit more little bit more affordable, but still they still, compared to ICE cars, they might still be quite pricey, but they are gaining market share. I'm talking about, I think it was a BYD CEO. You probably know about these brands better than I do, but their pricing is less expensive than Tesla, but they still, it's like not dirt cheap, and yet they are expanding over to the overseas market. Why is that?
So I think there is a Chinese market and there's the overseas market. And what's interesting about the Chinese market right now is that you can see that these Chinese EV makers are just moving so quickly. They're moving unimaginably quickly in adoption of a wide range of technology. And I can just, some of the basic stuff is they're using LiDARs in a lot of their new cars. And they're using these millimeter wave radars in their new cars. They're using infrared radars in their cars. And all these things are making the cars really safe, because all these additional sensors can spot troubles when it's raining, when it's really dark outside, and they can stop when you're not seeing, when there's like objects in front of you and things like that. And because they're making these really quick advancements in the Chinese market right now, if you ask someone who actually understands the industry in China, they will say that the Tesla product is not competitive. And basically Tesla is only selling because of the brand values in China. And you can say the same. Yeah.
A lot of these things you pointed out, like the brand new technologies, these may be exciting for all the techno geeks like us, but for most of the people, they look at the car, the first thing they look is visually, right? And one of the thing I find pleasantly surprised is that the Chinese EV makers are making beautiful cars right now. I mean, like, they really took a great leap in the car design. How did that happen? Like, is it because their acquisition of the foreign branded automakers like Geely buying Volvo? Is that how they gain, or they're offsourcing their design to European design houses, or how did that happen? Why how come suddenly these Chinese automakers are making these beautifully designed cars?
So I think there's definitely different steps here. Like Geely itself, definitely, they got a lot better at designing after they made their acquisitions. And if you look, BYD, their head designer is a German guy by the name of Wolfgang Egger. And they do have a lot of, they do have some Germans in their team that help them design stuff. But, over time, you're definitely seeing that over all these years where the foreign companies have worked in China, they help develop a lot of the domestic talent. And as they start having more money, they can also hire these like foreign ones and get them to train more of the domestic talents. And over time, you got to this point where the domestic automakers can design some absolutely beautiful cars, right? And even a lot of the new ones, like Huawei itself, the M9 looks great. And BYD, one of my favorite cars, probably the Huang U8, and it looks great actually. And
I wish I could afford one.
don't we all, right?
Yeah.
Actually, a funny story about that. Like one of the things that they talk about in the Chinese social media was how because it's because it can swim, you can operate a drone from it. You can lose a tire and still move forward, and it's like bulletproof or something. I can do tank turns. They're like, oh, this is like the best car for gangsters and mafias out there.
They just need to, maybe they just need to hire a couple of Hong Kong filmmakers, make some gangster flicks with their car. I'm sure that's in the pipeline. So what? Right. Okay. So